Never hit the record. But Doug Stanton, thank you for being here. This project is not about advocacy and mental health, but it's also about reaching into the ecosystem of LinkedIn and the interwebs and finding individuals such as yourself to have been able to take our stories and translate them and put them out for the entire world to hear. Because we don't always do that. We're the quiet professionals. We're the individuals that go into the unknown, come back, and then you never hear about it unless it was met with failure.
Yeah.
But in your book that details one of the greatest adventures of modern Green Berets, you get to bring all that to life to the audience. And Horse Soldiers is something that's near and dear to every Green Beret's heart.
Thank you, man. Yeah, that's great.
So, but before we dive into that, Doug, how did you find yourself as the quote unquote, as I said earlier, the adventure warrant officer to the regiment collecting this story?
Yeah, I remember walking around Fifth Group Adventure, Fifth Special Forces Group at Fort Campbell. For those listening, in 2003, I connected in 2002, and I called the PAO, the Army PAO in New York. They bumped me to Fort Bragg, where I connected with General Jeff Lambert, now retired. He connected me with now retired General John Mulholland, who is the colonel at Fifth Group, running everything, and getting spun up to go to Iraq. And there was no PAO. There was no one really at the front desk to take any phone calls. So I began to drop ship copies of my book, In Harm's Way, which is about World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys liked it, and the command liked it. It's about men aboard the USS Indianapolis who sank in the war and survived at sea. And I just started walking. They let me on post, and I started walking around the team rooms, knocking on doors. Like, hey, I had my full suitcase, my book, my business card. Like, guys are like, what? And I said, well, no, they said I could be here. And I walk in, and I remember talking for like 10 minutes with the guy. It's in the book. It's in Horse Soldiers. And I asked, let's make up a name. Is John Smith here? No, John's not here. He's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I kept going. And then finally he looks at me and goes, I'm John. I think that's, what do you want to know? So it just began this very slow process. I stayed at the Country Inn and Suites off Exit 4 on the way to Fort Campbell a lot of times, and just going and interviewing, and then met a person from the two teams, which are now named differently, but back then there were 595 and ODA 534. And then there was an command and control element that came in later, November 2nd of 2001. So as you know, Denny, these are the first adventure guys to go into Afghanistan after 9/11. They're the and so this is such early days. And the world was so different. And no one had tried this before, and they looked at me. I will tell you a funny story, because I think as a reporter, I've written 3 books now, one about World War II, Afghanistan, and Vietnam. I'm really a believer in the power of the dumb question. Adventure. It's dumb, and it's that thing, like, just ask and go with it, And I remember Colonel Major Scott Brower, now retired. He was he was the battalion commander, I think. But I'm sitting in his office, and all these guys kind of file in, like, who's this yokel who showed up in a suit and tie with all of his books and wants to talk to us? And they weren't hostile, but they're just like curious, like, who the heck was? Because remember, the biggest thing that SF was going to do before 9/11 was foreign internal defense. They were just going to go around and train and advise. They never were going to do any kind of lead action. So this was a big deal. And this is post 9/11. So this is after the action. I'm on Fort Campbell. They're headed to Iraq, but I'm trying to capture what they did 2 years earlier.
Yeah.
And Scott Brower kept saying, well, maybe you need to talk to ODA 534, ODA 595. And I'm like, ODA? What's an ODA? And I kind of knew, but they're like, the room stopped. And they looked at me like, and 2 things happened. They thought, this guy is so stupid. How dangerous can he be? and two, we really need to help him. And and that's how I operated throughout the 3 or 4 years it took to write the book. Just always straight ahead, very clear, very transparent. And Denny, my question was not so much adventure, the trainings and tactics and procedures, but what it felt like to be there. What was the effect? How did you accomplish this mission? Adventure. What was the human journey that you went on as an SF soldier? Because that is much that adventure, that, as you know, that mental kind of Jedi mind meld that you try to do with so many things as you're on your mission is the other half of the whole, direct action kinetic part of it. And that's unusual, and the public doesn't really understand that about the Special Forces soldier, right? I mean, yeah. So that's how I ended up there. Just kind of like, what was the Tom Hanks character? Adventure. He's always running around doing stuff. The box of chocolates guy.
Oh, Forrest Gump.
Yes. What's an ODA? Like, you can just hear the rung go.
Just stop. And I have to imagine that when you're diving into the story, how much coaxing and how much patience did you need with each one of these individuals? Because I can imagine that it was not the easiest thing to get them to divulge, like, adventure, what it was actually like in the moment, because we're all about data.
No, you guys are worse than biology teachers. I tell you, Mike Elmore, now retired, but adventure. He was the weapons sergeant on 595, and Mike was. He went on to have a long career after this. I think he just recently retired. He was like really straight ahead, he just really by the book person. And before I said anything, he said, "Doug, I can't tell you how much the batteries weigh and the radios." Like, he goes, "If I tell you how much the batteries weigh, then the enemy knows how many calories we have to consume. Where logistics train looks like." And I'm looking at him, and I thought, "Oh man, this is going to be great, Mike. I don't care about the batteries at all, right? Really. And I want to know what you did in the cave in the Darya Suf Valley in October of 2001. When you're with General Dostum, Adventure, and, Mahakek, and Atta's folks, these different tribal groups. What were you doing in the cave, waiting for the attack to happen?" And he goes, "Oh, well, I was drawing in my notebook. I was drawing 1970s vinyl record album covers, like Black Sabbath, AC/DC, or I said, "Oh, that's great. That's the kind of detail, because that makes you real. That makes you a human. That makes you a person that the reader and America can really relate to." And then we start from that position and move outward to this very unique and odd skill you have, which is to go into a country a la the OSS in World War II, and work behind enemy lines and create relationships and maybe never fire a shot. That would be. I remember hearing from General Lambert. So you asked how it happened to me. So they just kind of got used to me, and they realized I wasn't crazy, and was basically going to do what I said I was going to do, and so it came down from higher that the book was approved. I mean, I went to MacDill and SOCOM, and I went to 10th Mountain Group to talk to the QRF. I went to Fort Drum, because they were the QRF at the College Yankee Fortress, November 25th, 2001. Adventure. I got a hold of the Air Force TACPs. Adventure. Some intel folks. I must have interviewed 120 people. Someone from almost every element that was there. Adventure. And, holy cow. Adventure. Because I really want, and then the Afghan point of view. And when I went to Afghanistan twice, but the first trip was more consequential. Adventure. I got up to Mazar Sharif, and then the Afghan National Army was still there on the other side of the camp. Yeah. And so I found two people who had been in the battle in November of 25th, 2001. This was 2005. So I was able to walk with them through the College Yankee Fort and have them narrate the battle, because I knew what had happened from the U.S. side. Exactly. Yeah. When you read that section in Horse Soldiers, you'll see that it alternates between the Afghan and the the American side. So kind of wandered off the topic here, but that's that's how I just, you keep going.
Yeah. Adventure. I want to touch back on that. It seems like you have to be a forensic detective to be able to put all of this data together, and then also be able to put it in and conceptualize it from the Afghan perspective. Like that's a lot of work.
It is. I wish, behind me you can kind of see all this research, because I've just houses, and somewhere in there, adventure. There are things called scenarios. So let's say I was going to interview you about your last deployment. I'd interview you as the warrant officer, then your captain, and then your medic, and so on. And I would say, so what happened on day one? And then Denny, you would say, well, on day one we did X. The medic would say, on day one we did. And what happens is you get that all down, and then you transcribe it, and you open up a file on your computer that says day one. And Denny did this on day one, and then I jumped to the medic. And then once you go through all 50 pages of the interview, then you open a file called day two. And I've asked you what you see what I mean. So you create documentary scripts, so that when you're writing, and then I'm typing, and you might say to me, we got up, we actually ate something that day, and it was hot, and it rained at night, and you actually start writing the book that way. Yeah, you start kind of saying what you did, and then what your teammate did, and that's about 70% of the book writing, actually, the organization. Adventure. Yeah. And then you hang it all on the wall. Like, if I don't know what I wanted to do, I would tape. Like, there'd be sections where you just get lost, because the book is. That's the ferocious attack, Doug. The book gets bigger than you. Like, you have to kind of stand up and say, no, you got to take control of it. Yeah. And so I print it out and tape it together like in a film strip. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
At the end of the podcast, we're going to have a raffle, and the winner gets the dog.
That's okay. Seasons 1 through 3, my giant schnauzer would sit with me and just go crazy.
Well, this dog. So yeah, it's the manly toy poodle. Anyway, you get up there and you hang all that on the wall. You tape it up on the wall and look at it. And then you take a Sharpie and just start to attack it. And then when you open the door of the room, it starts to move like a bed of kelp.
It's a living document.
This book has just gone on too long. But go ahead. What's the next? I don't want to wander off your topic.
No, you're good. You are good. Doug, this is your show, my man. I am pulling everything from your experience writing this, because to understand the story is also to understand the human aspect. And Adventures Green Berets, the soft professionals, we're not always forthcoming with everything that we experience. I touched on it a little bit. We're great at data points. We're great at metrics. We're great at being able to provide clear, concise write-ups. But something we're not good about is touching into the emotional components of it.
Sure.
With those individuals were there, they may not have known what it would be like 20 years from that day.
Right.
But they knew at that moment when they touched down in Afghanistan, they were carrying the ball. They were going in and going to do something that had not been done. And that's what's amazing about you being able to be able to come in contact with these individuals and pull that story from them.
Yeah, boy, when you put it like that, it was clear to everybody that I was interested in the unconventional warfare part of what they did.
Mm-hmm. Adventure.
Really, usually don't have a dog or a phone ringing, but
adventure.
And just as an aside, really grateful to Jerry Bruckheimer and Nikolai Fuselig, who made this movie called 12 Strong and didn't turn it into a SEAL movie.
Yes.
a Rambo
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Because even they understood that it was a different kind of war movie. It's a war movie about guys who land somewhere and they want to talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you want? What will stop you from fighting these guys? What are your common, I mean, all the
Yep.
doctrine, the general public doesn't know. That's a tough war movie to make, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it was clear to them that that's what I was interested in. I was really interested because I had not understood this on September 10th, 2001. I didn't know anything about this. And my discovery of the quote story was reading a Time magazine piece by a great journalist named Alex Perry. Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this. And he had found himself kind of trapped inside College Angie on November 25th, 2001. He ended up filing this story about that battle.
Mm-hmm.
And people might remember that a lot of enemy forces had surrendered to Kunduz and been escorted by convoy back into Mazar-e-Sharif, which they had lost in the not too distant past. They had fled from that city. It turns out now the surrender was perfidious. They were actually surrendering in a Trojan horse move to get back into the city, as many of your teammates know. And once they get into College Angie, they break out, or they try to break out. In the middle of that adventure was this American named John Walker Lind.
Yep.
Who has earlier he's come to Yemen to study Arabic from Marin County, California, if I have it correctly. And like a pinball, he's just kind of gone through these wickets and made decisions that have placed him ultimately in bin Laden's brigade. At which point, I feel he didn't know what the hell he was doing, obviously, or what he would do next. If he had tried to escape, they would have probably shot him in the back. And although I did talk to one intelligence officer later who said that when Lynn was found, he had a lot of powder burns on his cheek. Firing a weapon. Yep. That was kind of immaterial to his trial, but he was later convicted and found guilty of aiding and abetting the enemy and spent time in prison and is now released. But his discovery there was a shock to America and the world, really. And tragically, as you know, the guy bending down in the College Angie courtyard, the fortress, is Michael Spann, who is a young intelligence officer with the agency, and he's looking at him. He's trying to figure out something's not right about this guy. He can't quite figure it out. Lynn does not say anything. Like, hey, we're down in this dungeon. It was called the Pink House, which I went to, and down the stairs. And we're all gathered down there, and they have grenades, and they have a plan, and they're going to bust out. And while Mike and his colleague Dave Tyson and there's just two of them, by the way, and they're not really heavily armed. Just surrenders happen so quickly, and things are moving fast. And Mike gets attacked, and he's tragically killed, and Tyson escapes to Dostum's kind of half of the fortress. It's enormous. It's about 300 meters across. And news breaks, and that's how we learn, really, that we have Special Forces soldiers or U.S. Army personnel in Afghanistan, that an American is there, and that the CIA is there. Yeah. And so Alex finds that. And I thought, well, I'll just write a book about how those two Americans kind of come together. But then that really wasn't. I have to bring the manly dog up here. That was really, submit your raffle ticket now. I had to figure out how they ended up there, but then I realized, no, that's not it. That's really, who is this adventure? What is this part of the U.S. Army that no one really knows about? Yeah. Adventure. The quiet professionals. And you guys, I had to hand it to the SF community. They really do believe in their bumper sticker.
To a fault, Doug.
We couldn't say the word Delta Force for a long, long time, but yet they published more books than any SF guy. right? I mean,
and Chuck Norris did make some great movies.
I don't want to get you in trouble with your friends, but so I just was really honest and open, and I approached it not so much as a blood and guts story of bombs and bullets.
Yeah,
I approached it as how did you remember? I think Rumsfeld or the command gave a year or 2 years to achieve what happened in Afghanistan. Yeah. And what it really happened by January of 2002, adventure, as you know, pretty much sealed. At least Taliban had collapsed and moved into Pakistan or surrendered or just put down their weapons. But it's quite an amazing adventure, quite an amazing victory. Adventure. It's funny. I won't name the general who told me this, but he's in the Pentagon. And so I was interested in just the conventional army and the unconventional army and that tension between the two. That's always
yes, especially in Afghanistan, which I'm sure the guys, as you were talking to them, had a lot of opinions about it. But there's a lot of us that believe that the early successes we had in Afghanistan could have been capitalized had it not been for big army coming in and a lot of big army leadership.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Horse Soldiers is a book about the first 10 minutes of a 20-year war.
Yeah,
and it's really about
adventure.
It's really about when the doctrine really was followed. It did work. Adventure. What choice did the command have? I mean, there was no plan to invade Afghanistan, and there was no time to do that. But
adventure.
This Special Forces generals walking down the Pentagon hallway. Adventure coming at him is his colleague, his equal, his peer, from the conventional side. And the conventional side general says, "Hey, so and so, I bet you're really proud of what you did in Afghanistan." And the SF general says, "Yeah, we are." He goes, and the other guy from conventional says, "Good, because you'll never get to do it again." I mean, adventure. Have you heard? I mean, is that your sense of relationship?
Yeah. It's not a beautiful relationship by any means, and it continues to grow and expand. And look, I am no longer beholden to a commander, so I will say this: I have always felt better supported and better enabled when underneath leadership, adventure that comes from my community. Yeah, like you'll never be in a situation where you're worse off than when you have conventional leaders in charge of soft elements. Adventure, that's the truth. That's just there's a lot of, and I don't know if it's adventure. I think there is. Some individuals have that idea that we're just cowboys and renegades, and then there's a lot of I couldn't do it, so I'm going to be bitter and angry, and that's just something we experience. All of us at some point have seen that.
Keep talking, Denny. I got to let you. Why do you think that is?
I think honestly, they don't know how to utilize the soft forces, and they see themselves as having to posture, having to adventure, sort of puff out their chest.
The conventional,
yeah. And the reality is, like we're adventure. We're not against them. We're not there to be renegades and cowboys. We follow orders. We do our job, and there isn't a need for that sort of competition and negative connotation. But we've seen it. All of us have. If you've served within SOF at some point, you've experienced it and seen it, and it does suck. And our senior leaders, they've all experienced it themselves. But adventure. You don't want anybody else. When you absolutely need the best, you're the ones that come after and look for us. We're a force to multiply for a reason. Our doctrine is sound. What we bring to the tools and resources we bring to the fight are, they always wanted, and they're always coveted. I've never met a conventional officer that didn't have anything positive to say. Adventure, they're still so hesitant to embrace and understand where we fit in the grand big scheme of things. And even now, I hear it, even though we're not technically at war, I still see the issues that our community is facing. But at the end of the day, SOF continues to move on. SF continues to deploy. We're still doing our core tasks and our core missions. And I think that now more than ever, the UW mission set, the mission set that's unique and specific to special forces is needed. And we're seeing that fight play out in places like Ukraine. We don't have a conventional force foothold there, but I would beg to argue that when we are ready to put boots on the ground, it's going to be the unconventional side. It's going to be the SOF individuals and SOF units that are utilized. We're just different, and we're more specialized for that fight.
Adventure. I mean, I don't know if you. I'm assuming that adventure training and advising is going on right now. I mean, I don't know if it's allowed. I mean, technically, but I mean that's a classic. Adventure. It's Afghanistan all over again. It's just it's the same dynamic, just
exactly
different religions. And goals and adventure mores. But it's control. Well, it must be very hard for a conventional general to deputize a young captain to go meet up with a warlord. And kneel down and draw on the dirt. Adventure plan that involves the future of the United States. So
exactly. Without 24-hour control. And that's the beauty of that time period. Just a few years ago, before Afghanistan was done, there wasn't this. If you go on mission, you're sending reports. You're pushing back to command on red side. You're pushing back. If comms go down, you're coming up on iridium. Back then, there wasn't that. Commander had to understand that team was going in and hey, what's our combo windows? When are we going to have contact with this team? And it's not like 2-4 hours, no days. Weeks, right? Going all the way back to the Vietnam era. And that's the beautiful thing of looking at those individuals, looking at that mission. We can see that it's still possible for us to expect that from our SOF operators. We don't own the air anymore with drones and the new advancements in tech. So we're going to have to dial back and scale and be able to say, you know what, operationally, I have to assume this risk that element's going to go in there and I won't be able to talk to them until maybe 2-3 days. They'll come up on their window.
I'm curious. So how is the drone affected the deployment of a small force like an SF team attaching it? I mean, it's kind of off topic, but I'm just interested because the drone is kind of an asymmetric weapon. Right? It moves the front line all over the place.
And just in the matter of just 4 or 5 years, it's changed so much. On the ground, we're using our own Mavic drones to get eyes on. And in a matter of a few short years, now we have the same over-the-shelf drone capability that can be utilized to drop ordnance.
Right.
And now suicide drones. What's the next? And we've been trying to just rapidly develop new tech to mitigate that. Right. There's so many defense tech companies that have sprung up. They're trying to fill that void in capabilities because everybody right now on Earth has access to what's going on in Ukraine and all over the world where drones are being utilized as weapon systems. And it's scary. It's a scary new world we're living in where off the market drones can be utilized as a weapon. But it's advancing so fast. And we're even here in the stateside, we're developing new stuff. And I just when you think you've seen it all, new things get released and get put out on the internet and social media. So it's an advancing and scary world. The Afghan soft individual is no longer relevant as far as TTPs and training adventure tactics. Just like our counterparts, they were doing things that, to the general public in that time period just thought it was just not impossible. Adventure, how they're able to get in the frontline traits of the enemies and drop bombs with laser guided guidance. Like, oh my goodness. Like, yeah, that's nowadays it's like, that's just, we're just so used to this capability. Like,
well, I know that. I mean, there's some stories of calling in those, using the soft lam, calling in these smart bombs, these JDAMs, on the Taliban battlefield in Afghanistan, where the person on the ground is telling, and first of all, it's close air support, with a B-52, which is a what is that? A misnomer. And so the guy on the ground says, anything in a truck is an enemy, or see anything with wheels, you can bomb it. Because the locals have it was this weird pure battle space where there were not really civilians out there on the plane. There was either Taliban and trucks, or armor, and then there were Atta, Mahakek, and Dostum, and others on horses or their own trucks. And the pilot said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Drop on anything with wheels because we're on horseback." And this was a shock to those guys. And when they started to drop bombs, they would call in, they would try to figure out the distance, and then sit and plot coordinates, and then radio them up to the aircraft, and then they would plug them into the JDAM, and then it would drop, and then they'd be off, and then they'd redo it. And the Taliban would come out of their bunker, and they're like looking around, like, where is this stuff? They thought it was coming over the ground.
Yeah.
They had no concept, because you're right. That's only 23 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I mean, I don't know how many people, I'm sure a lot of people in the community already know why they're on horseback. But for those who don't, they were there because, let's just take General Rashid Dostum as an example. They're fighting for years with the Taliban, who have armor, even have a little Air Force, which people didn't really know. And they would take some ground. They might overwhelm it on their horses. Because the armor and the mechanical stuff couldn't adjust. This is why it gets really kind of interesting in special forces. Like the 20th century mechanical stuff cannot adjust or adapt quickly enough for the charging human. And so you see this thing where the John Boyd, who is the thinker about the OODA loop, observation, orientation, decision, and action, where the person on horseback gets inside their OODA loop, and they can't adjust quickly enough. So they would take the ground, capture the hill, but then, as you know, the armor would retreat, and then turn around and then blow them back off the hill. And that's why there was this stalemate before 9/11. And when the towers fell, I remember reading in some kind of brief or after action report that Mahakek, the Hazara tribal leader, said, "Oh, thank God the Americans now will come," because they had all been in a stalemate. And what the U.S. did, what the SF teams did with the Air Force TACPs and these soft lambs, is when they charged the ground and took it, then they called in the strike and blew up the armor so the armor could not reattack and then take the ground again. And it just started to really collapse them as they drove north to Mazar-e Sharif, and then they took Kabul. There were a couple of movements going on, but
one thing that doesn't get enough coverage is that aspect of it. We have to give credit where credit's due. The TACPs, the air component,
right?
Without that piece, it's a whole different battle. 12 guys on horseback and being able to infiltrate make contact with the partner force, build rapport, enhance their capabilities. That's amazing. That's great. But we have to talk about the air power. We have to talk about the Air Force being able to conduct what they did, which, again, back then, they didn't have a frame of reference and hadn't done that before.
No.
And now they're able to do it.
Right, and the TACPs are assigned to the teams. So they're, and they're the I think they're they got 2 per team or 1 per team. And I talked to them too. And they weren't, initially welcomed by the team because the team thought they were fully capable of calling in air because you guys train for it. But the reality is, I mean, that's all they do. And I think that ultimately it was,
And I have to give shout out to 2 of our own. Shout out to Ryan and Luke, our intimately our close friends here at Security Hall, because Ryan was our TACP last trip, and that's something we are very, very proud of the capabilities we have internally within the team. We send guys to go get qualified and certified in being able to drop ordnance. We have our own, but it is very different having that TACP or that CCT on a team because they do that all day, every day, rain or snow, shine. They do it, and they're great at it. And controlling that chaos in the air is insane. I mean, the movies don't do it justice. The book, you can't really live it until you've gone out to a range and seen what these individuals go through to achieve that certification. It is not an easy thing. When you had those conversations with those individuals, what was that like? Adventure with the TACPs.
Well, I was talking with one who had to drop
Adventure
Sharif on a building that the Taliban had taken. They wouldn't get out. They couldn't get them out of this building. They'd taken the town, and he set up across the street on top of another building. And they're in a residential. There are a lot of people around. Although it's utter chaos, there are bodies on the street. The fighting was intense, and he called the bomb, and it came right through the roof of the building. and the enemy came flooding out those who were still around. They got it, and they never you guys never really brag, so.
At least not in public.
At least not in public. He was adventure. It was intense because the other thing was I want to remind you, like some of the close air was like this. Okay, pilot, do you see that tree? Now, do you see the shadow of the tree?
Yep.
I am 500 meters to the east of the shadow of the tree. And if you look at the contour map, you might see, so I don't know what it's like today, but it was pretty primitive and adventure. Most of the people listening to the show, what should we talk about that would tell them about the special characteristics of SF that they might not know? I don't want to talk about things. I don't want to tell the guys who already know all of it.
Please. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, as if I know what I'm talking about, but
adventure.
I mean, what I will say, what did impress me is what got into it was just the training of trying to think in ambiguous situations.
Yep. Adventure,
which is really in the end almost it's impossible. You can't really. I mean, you can create scenarios in which the young captain, for instance, when I went to Robin Sage and took part of it as an auxiliary. Actually, they gave me the job of journalist, and they had triage, and I had to carry a litter, and it was fascinating. I was watching the teachers in black T-shirts out in the bushes, kind of guiding the scenario. And I don't know if I told you this, but the G chief was a guy from Vietnam, the Sante raid.
Yeah.
Kind of a legend, and everyone was really. I wish I could remember his name. Someone listening will know who I'm talking about.
Adventure.
Boy, he was just like
Adventure.
not
Adventure.
brutal, but just strong. He's really into the role. And these guys come in, as you know, they come in by pickup, not helicopter, and have to trudge into camp.
Adventure.
And, try to build rapport with the guerrillas because they've been attached, as everyone in SF knows, to this G chief. Try to link up with him and see what he needs and help him. And I'd gone to the camping store because I'd done a lot of reading. So I didn't know more than the captains, but I'd gone to the camping store and bought like a lantern and a heat blanket and a sleeping pad, gifts.
Yeah.
And so when I showed up, I presented them to the guerrillas, and they're like, "Oh, come on in."
Yeah.
And I'm sitting around the campfire, and I'm looking over at these poor, the SF candidates, who are going through Robin Sage, and they didn't have time to go to the camping store, but they, I was kind of surprised that they didn't work harder to kind of schmooze, the guy, and but that was lesson learned. I mean, that's why they do this.
Yeah, that's a rook move. Rule number 1, if you're listening and you're about to go to Robin Sage, smuggle in a small bottle of bourbon. That will instantly build rapport.
Or Skittles, anything. Camping. I mean, because there you're sleeping. There's nothing to eat, and so anyway, in the middle of this, the G chief, he what does he do? He points to the captain and he says, "Show me the intel in your pocket."
Adventure.
And of course he can't, right?
Yeah.
He can't close this to
Adventure.
This person, but then the G chief says, "Well, if you don't, then I'm going to beat one of my men." And he raises his stick like he's going to club this guy, and the cadre was from the 101st, I think, or something. So they had the unlucky job being there for the week, playing guerrillas. I don't know if they liked it or not. It seemed kind of miserable after a while. But so what does the captain do? And this is those of you who don't know this kind of warfare and warfighting. This is a key moment. Like if he discloses this intelligence, he's broken all kinds of laws and protocols. If he allows the guerrilla chief to beat his guy, then he has to remove himself from the situation. It's a human rights violation, right?
Adventure.
There's no right answer here.
Adventure.
There is. He's got to somehow figure out, use his wits to talk, right? And the guy, the young captain, froze. He just did know what to do, and but he'd never been in this situation. This is early, I think he'd done all of his jump training and et cetera. But so that it was very interesting. And this is what the public needs to know. The instructors came out of the bushes and they huddled and they said, "Okay, Adventure, Captain Smith, here you are. This is a problem. If you do this, this is what happens. You do that. But the thing you need to realize, Captain Smith, is this moment just didn't happen now. It actually had been percolating for a couple of days. And if you'd been aware of Adventure, the guerrilla chief, maybe you'd seen that he saw Adventure when your intel guy had given you this intel. Yeah. Like you just awareness. Adventure. And that is a really, you don't get that in boot camp.
You don't. And that's the beauty of being in that world, being in that training and understanding how to operate in those ill-defined problem areas. Like you live in the gray. You live constantly knowing that you're going to have to develop adventure gab. Be able to talk your way through something fast. And that's a beauty of the environment you're in. Because if you sent anybody else into that environment, into Afghanistan as that first response, would have had a very different outcome.
Yeah, I mean the the conventional guy, who knows? They might have pulled their weapons out. They might have had a standoff.
Yeah. Adventure.
He said, "Go ahead, beat him. I don't care if you beat, shoot him." You know, I mean, all kinds of adventure. And then the morale starts to break down the team, right? I mean, it has all these
adventure
after effects. And, so how you train someone to think that way, these are lessons, however, in life, which is why I thought was interesting about writing the book Horse Soldiers, is that
adventure.
You know, when I was reading, if you haven't gone to Wikipedia and typed in John Boyd, there's an interesting thing. He was an Air Force thinker, right, and pilot. Mm-hmm. And the short anecdote is that at some point he's flying, and he gets into a mock battle with a Russian MiG, and I'm not sure how or what airspace this was, but just for the purposes of this illustration, it happens. And he's, however, being beat. They're not really going to shoot each other, but, you know, I think they're harassing each other. And the MiG is superior to his aircraft. But he realizes that his instructor at one point said, never on this aircraft, like, push this pedal and pull this stick, because if you do, this aircraft will fall out of the sky.
Adventure.
But that's what he does.
Adventure.
So he's going along, and so he does that. So he drops. And now the MiG zooms past. Now he comes back up in his superior position. So the point of it is that, as in the thing, I think one of the core fundamentals of SF is that he who changes fastest or adapts most quickly can overwhelm a superior force, especially even a mechanical force, a la the horses charging the adventure. Armor line. And just for civilians such as myself, learning that and thinking about it, and then of course, post-war, you see a lot of people come out of the Army and they start to talk about these ideas in the business community. Adventure. You know, how do you get ahead, quote, and stay ahead? But I just thought that was such an interesting, you know, changing your state. Yeah. And that was the other thing that was interesting about meeting. You talked about, how did I meet these guys? Is often they didn't look like adventure. I mean, Mark Mitchell, who ends up winning the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions in College Yankee. Adventure. He's from Wisconsin. We became good friends. We still keep in touch. Adventure. Mark might have passed for a high school biology teacher. Adventure. Strong, worked out a lot, did a lot of PT, but not a chest beater. Yeah, you know, a thumper, and adventure, but a thinker. And that's what was. I mean, I even went to adventure. I think it was at Robin Sage. I spent 3 hours in some lecture. No, this was at SWIC. Yeah. Listening to the 3 hours, listening to these Special Forces soldiers debate what define link up. I mean, it was
yeah, we would do that. Yep.
something, you know, like talking about bridge or like, you know, but, you know, what is a link up?
Adventure.
Are you just linking up, or are you? Well, I mean, you can tell me more than that, but I mean, these were the things that were really fascinating that kind of kept me going and writing the book.
Yeah. And I want to ask you now, revisiting this adventure, and right now, the new editions of Horse Soldiers have an additional new chapter.
Yeah.
Revisiting this 20 years later. Adventure. What was that like?
It was depressing.
Adventure.
You know,
adventure.
It was depressing in a contact kind of way. It wasn't as it was depressing because when I talked to when I talked to Mark Mitchell, who actually went on to work at the NSC, went into government service. Adventure. He was just depressed. My friend, who was the chief political advisor to NATO, who actually lives in my hometown, he said to me, "Wow, what was my career about?" Adventure. You know, 'cause he'd made 10 or 20 trips to Afghanistan, back and forth from Brunsum in the Netherlands, working with all the principals in the country. Adventure. And so it has this little thing that says new afterward on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. I called up, maybe 22 people. And I tried really to reach out to women in Afghanistan, or a lot of them working in London or England, because they couldn't safely work in Kabul anymore, and I caught some of the interpreters who had moved to Houston and Dallas, who'd been on some of the teams. They had gotten out, and asked them. And the thing that kept coming up was and my question was, what did we gain and what had it cost and what did we lose? And the biggest thing that everyone said was education, that no matter what else had happened during those 20 years, selfishly or not, the Afghans who were there for that 20 years, those women, especially young girls and the men, had gotten a leg up in the world.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the culture had been changed. It's hard to put the genie back in the bottle, but they had learned so much and made some strides on the internet and realizing the world was larger. That can't be erased, even though the Taliban, is obviously doing just that,
rapidly.
Right, rapidly. And
adventure.
Talking with, people read the chapter,
adventure.
Andy Marshall.
Adventure.
So Andy was attached to one of Dostum's elements, and they had gone way out to the east. They start down in the Darya Suf Valley, and they spread out like this, make a big horseshoe, and they just keep moving up the valley, and they're moving to Mazar-e-Sharif, and they keep spotting the Taliban. They keep calling in air. They keep blowing them up. They keep, just keep moving. And he's way out there with
adventure.
I think 2 guys, or maybe one other guy from the team. They've split into elements, as you know. They do, and so he really had some rough work, but Andy was a very cool guy. He was so capable, and I just never thought I'd hear him say this. But when I called him up, I said, "What's going on 20 years later?"
Adventure.
I said, "What advice do you have for people in Afghanistan now?" He goes, "Run."
Adventure.
And, Andy, wow. He goes, I said, okay.
Adventure.
He goes,
adventure.
If you had asked me 20 years ago,
adventure.
Adventure. He goes, my son ended up in Iraq, so now I had skin in the game.
Adventure.
In a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And
adventure.
If you thought that your own son was going to get blown up, et cetera, and this is what was going to happen, would you think it was worth it? I mean, it just, he was a true special forces warrior, and that he and Paul Evans, who was the engineer on the team, Paul and Andy worked a lot together. They had a whole thing in a certain place where they actually started to go into adventure. Phase 3 of the UW doctrine, where they just start building an economy, the civil society.
Yeah.
I mean, they had something, they're moving way beyond
adventure,
and so on. So they were very committed. So he just felt they were never given a chance to do that.
Adventure.
And then of course, as General Lambert says in the chapter, the guy who gave me the original kind of invitation, said they turned it into the big army. Yep. Said, we're going to turn this into America. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm paraphrasing him.
Adventure.
I know I'm kind of ranging far afield here, but
adventure.
Maybe you can help me explain what I'm trying to say to people, which is
adventure.
On the one hand, we wanted the Afghans, we needed them to be our ally. We needed them to make the area unsafe.
Adventure.
For the terrorist activity, right? But on the other hand,
adventure.
We didn't really want it to be America.
Exactly.
When you were deployed there, you weren't thinking, "Oh, I'm going to turn this into Ohio," right?
No, not at all.
No.
And that's exactly it. That's the whole shebang. I'm so glad you brought us here, because that's where a lot of us feel it went wrong. Adventure, diplomacy, and statesmanship really took a left field, or left turn, went way off course.
Yeah,
with people wanting to implement American-like structures and American-like institutions into a nation that will never, ever be like America. Adventure. Adventure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I say these things because all the blood and treasure that was spent both in American and international partners. And then don't forget the Afghans who sacrificed mightily and still believe in it. Adventure. They, at the 9/11 Memorial Park in New York City, where the towers were, there's a statue now called the America's Freedom Memorial Monument, something like it. But the nickname for it is the Horse Soldier statue. I went. There were a couple of dedications, but how much the world had changed is that when I was writing the book, I used pseudonyms. So Andy Marshall is actually Sam Diller in the book. But at the time, they all wanted to be more private.
Yeah. Which is understandable. I mean, they were still,
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I did that, but then I think it was in 2010. All of us walked down Fifth Avenue in New York City behind the statue in broad daylight, as it was being dedicated at it was later moved again to the 9/11 park.
Yeah.
But at one point, General Dostum's son, he was going to a university in America. He showed up at one of the dedications.
Oh, wow.
And he was there talking with our daughter who speaks Turkish. And so, these two young people under 30, one a Muslim, one not a Muslim, talking. And I just thought, I actually said this to one of the guys I wrote about. They said I was full of baloney, but I said, well, maybe that's the future. Like, if you can get to that point where these younger people who don't have these religious prejudices and these and that's actually what I heard from talking to some. It's just funny, even the interps, who are in their 30s and 40s, so younger people, and I maybe talked to them 3 years ago. They said, let the young people take over. Get rid of these old guys.
Yeah.
And that was a theme that kept coming up. So I certainly I don't want to leave this by saying the Afghans are hopeful. They're fighting, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've been involved, because you probably have in just some relocations. Or you probably, some of your guys that you worked with have come to the States, right? I mean, I know where I live in Michigan, we've welcomed 4 families.
We've been fortunate to have a lot of guys that, heck, I have one of the interpreters that I worked with. I know he's in Raleigh, North Carolina. So that's beautiful. That's amazing. That's a win. And there's a few more, but there's still the Facebook messages from individuals that are still there.
I know.
That are still trying to get out. That's that is a moral injury that a lot of us are dealing with.
Right.
How do we navigate that? How do you reconcile what our nation wasn't willing to do, which was to take care of the guys that took care of us,
right?
The guys that were willing to go toe to toe with the enemy next, and rack and file with us. That is a very, very hard pill to swallow. But there is hope. There are organizations that to this day are still plugged in to networks in country, trying desperately to get people out of there.
The Khan, who in his family, he came to town. He got a job. I mean, he worked. He was attached to a lot of JSOC teams. I mean, they even sent him to Ranger School back in the U.S. I mean, he is just A1 person.
Yeah,
and he's happy to be here, and he works his ass. I mean, the young daughter, Taqwa. So when Horse Soldiers came out, I started this thing called the National Writer Series, and we started these writing programs for kids who maybe couldn't otherwise have it, such as I was growing up in Traverse City, Michigan. And Taqwa actually is learning English, and she won a scholarship.
Wow!
Writing an essay about leaving Kabul, leaving Afghanistan in August when it fell. So that's really heartening.
adventure, adventure.
The other odd coincidence about writing this book is that Shannon Spann
adventure
has she was Mike Spann's widow, and Mike was the intelligence officer killed in College Engie. I've gotten to know her a bit, and she's been working very hard to try to get families that actually worked with the CIA team, the pilot team, not the pilot team, but the lead team that went in ahead of time. And I talked with her about the chapter, and
adventure.
Her big thing, you asked about, well, what about today, was how divided we've become. That her husband, her deceased husband, Mike, having been part of a combat operation, a mission in which was trying to remove one element from the society and join people back together. Because civilians listening don't know that the tribes over there were fighting each other until you guys showed up and tried to get everyone pointed in one direction.
Yeah,
and Shannon's if you get a chance to read the chapter, Shannon's reflections on what it all means are really interesting. How do you feel? I mean, you said moral injury.
Yeah.
You know the Jonathan Shea book, Odysseus in America?
No.
I think Jonathan Shea lives in Boston. He was the psychiatrist or psychologist who came up. Well, I don't know if he came up with the idea of moral injury, but everyone listening, if you haven't seen Odysseus in America,
adventure,
and Achilles in Vietnam, he took a lot of Vietnam vets.
Adventure.
And in the Odysseus in America book, he takes the story of Odysseus, the warrior who was gone a long time, and he's kept trying to get home, and he tries to reintegrate. He comes home, he goes into the dining hall. His wife doesn't recognize him, and he breaks down the myth, and he uses it to talk about the modern reentry of the soldier into society.
It's funny because without even reading that book, so many of us have used that same story to explain how we feel.
Yeah, well, if you are
adventure,
exactly. Well,
if you have to jot that down,
if you're talking to anybody professionally, they may have gone to a conference that Shea does. I mean, it is a thing, and it's really interesting.
Yeah,
because if you don't have a story to live by, if you don't have a way to make sense, this is what I found in writing my Vietnam book.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't tell your story, then you don't really have your voice yet.
Yes,
and you haven't made sense of the quote nonsense that's happened, not the ridiculousness, but literally stuff that doesn't make sense, the nonsense. And I think that book is very helpful to a lot of people. So
you just brought it full circle right now, Doug, because the whole purpose of today was to, if the audience right now, if you're listening, if you're a member of the SOF community or you're a part of the Afghan Adventure Project, as I like to say, if you're a part of the past 20 years, there's a story. There is something within you that you want to share that you maybe think that, no, I'm a quiet professional, I shouldn't share this. But if you don't share your story, we're gonna forget. And history is going to continue moving. Time's going to continue moving. We need to start cataloging and start being able to bring out these stories and sharing them.
Yeah,
Horse Soldier can't just be the last story of our time in Afghanistan. It should be the first of many. There are so many pivotal moments of our time there. And I know what you're thinking. Well, my story is not that important. Adventure. Take that critic. Adventure. And make him shut up. Adventure. Mm-hmm. There's something that all of you should be sharing. And that's your time in that war zone, your time in that country. And maybe it's not a great American history lesson, but maybe it's a great part of a larger story. Connect with your friends, connect with your brothers and sisters. I've started taking part of an anthology, a book that's going to be published here soon. And it's not because I'm some great, wonderful writer. No, it's because there's something powerful that I want to share with the world. And within each and every one of you listening, there is a story that's waiting to be told. Don't just die holding on to it. Share it with the world, because I know that there's something great within you that could connect within somebody else and allow them to share their story. And there's been so many great moments in that war that don't even have to include actual combat. Just a story of friends, just a story of a connection made downrange. That in and of itself is a story that I'd love to read about, and so many of us would as well. So please, take the time to explore your time in service. Take the time to explore all the things you went through and write it down and share it. Adventure.
Exactly. Or
adventure.
Have someone talk to you.
Yep. Adventure.
Or start a group. Talking is really important.
Adventure. Adventure. Adventure.
I mean, the best way for people to start is say, well, just tell me what happened. It's like that was my question. You asked, why did they talk to me?
Adventure.
That's what I asked. I didn't say, adventure. Tell me who you killed. Tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me the blood. Tell me what happened.
Adventure.
How did it make you feel? And how did it change you? And how did you do your job?
Adventure.
Important. But anyway, that, Jonathan Shea.
Adventure.
I will say this as we wrap up. In my experience of interviewing people for In Harm's Way, which is about World War II vets, what seems to happen with the American male is they get to be about 70 and they open up.
Adventure.
Yeah. Right now we're in that period with the Vietnam veteran.
Yep.
But don't wait. I don't think we can wait that long for the Afghan vet. We can't wait. We can't another 40 years, 30 years. Because why? Because we have 2 generations of Americans who've been militarized and run through these rapid and repetitive deployments, and in some ways ground down and really worn out. And they can't hold all that inside for 30 years. No, it's a different experience. I mean, 20 years.
Yeah. Adventure. It's our turn.
And that's a long time to be at war.
Yeah. And that's one thing that you can definitely say about the writing experience. It's cathartic, get it out, and then you share it. And then you're not carrying that burden on your back. You're allowing others to help you carry that.
Right.
So take a knee, write down your story, get it out there, because we need it. We need to save our history, and collectively, we can all take on this challenge. So, Doug, thank you so much for being here today. Your book, Poor Soldier, but also In Harm's Way, the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, and the story of its survivors. And then your other book on Vietnam, Adventure,
The Odyssey of
Echo Company. Yes, there it is.
That very much, that book is very much in tune with what you just said.
Yeah. Adventure.
So,
Adventure. Yeah. And all those books will be in the episode description. So either pause or after you're done listening to it, go to the episode description, click the links, and go straight to the books. Again, Doug, thank you for what you did for us in the regiment. Thank you for getting our story, Poor Soldier, out there. And I can't wait to read all your other books. You got anything else that's waiting to get published?
No, COVID kind of slowed me down. I'm behind. I'm trying to figure out what to do with all this stuff.
Well, sir, get to work, because I love to read.
You got to get to work. All right. Hey, Denny, keep in touch. If anything I can do, as you guys try to tell your stories. The thing I'll leave you with is, because I do teaching when it comes to writing. Someone says, I don't know what to write. You say to them, okay, do this then.
Adventure.
If I don't know what to write, but if I did know what to write, I would write that.
Adventure.
And then you just keep going.
There you go.
It's all up here. Mostly, the inability to write is a mental problem.
Heck yeah. Thank you, Doug.
Okay. See you, man.
We'll see you guys till next time. Take care.